Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Guess who has 2 thumbs and is still sunburnt? Your gal, Juliberry! Oh my gosh. Welcome everyone. It has been a long time coming since we last did an SBI Sunday stream, but it is back! Hello, Arbiter first. Yes, you get first rights. Congratulations. Oh my goodness. And hello, Extrosity. Hello, Christy May. Hello, MT. First time chatter, Cyber Angels. Welcome. And hello, Manny. Oh my goodness. Yo, hi, Prism. Hello. What's going on? And hello, Jenny. Welcome everyone to the stream. Now, what I have in store for you all tonight. It's a good one. It's a great one even. Because me and my best friend, Danny Art Online, wrote it. How about them apples? How about them apples? Oh my goodness gracious. Y'all, I'm so excited. I didn't realize that I hadn't read chapter 4 to you guys. I was looking back on my VODs channel, shameless plug. I looked for it. I searched high and low, and I could only find chapters 1 through 3. And then, of course, the spin-off, Danny's Christmas gift to me, The Last Christmas. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart. That is a song. Guys, oh my gosh. Okay, so if y'all, like, have AO3, and if you've read the fic, we have linked in the first chapter. Oh, Blu-rays coming in with the ooh-woo sound alert. Thank you for that. We linked in the first chapter in our author's notes a Spotify playlist of the canonical record collection that Tommy has in our story. So, fun freaking fact. I got my water here with me, so I can do the good old slurpy slurp. Yep, I don't know why it's so quiet, but it's there. And of course, let's see. I forgot to put up Streamlabs. Hold on. I knew I was forgetting something. And of course, we have the PNG tuber still active. But oh my gosh, how is everyone doing today? How's your day? Oh my gosh, my day has been so chill. Been hanging out with my family. We watched a lot of movies today. I just got done filming a TikTok with my sisters and my dad. So I don't know if y'all know about my younger sister, Caroline. She blew up on TikTok a while ago with my dad. I don't know if y'all have seen the TikTok with a little a girl younger than me pulling my dad's fake arm off. That was kind of well timed, Blue. Well done. Yeah, that's my sister. That's my dad. Yeah, Caroline. She ripped my dad's fake arm off of his body and it blew up. And so now we use our father for content. I'm back from vacation, so I'm good. Oh, I'm so glad to hear. I hope your vacation was lovely. Considering you're typing, I'm assuming you got back home safe. But yeah. Oh, speaking of vacation, yo, my family planned a vacation. I'm so excited. We're going to a beach. I'm not going to tell you where, though, because I care about my safety. But we finally planned a beach trip, and we're so excited. So I'm going to be gone the 16th through the 22nd of this month. So, but other than that, I will have content out for you guys by then. But hello, the hidden mask. Hello. But I am so excited to get into this lovely story because I'm so silly and I didn't realize we hadn't read chapter 4. So without further ado, I'm gonna turn on the the lore. Yippee! I'm gonna turn on the lore playlist. Heck yeah. This is gonna be poggers. Okay. Oh my gosh. Should I turn off sound alerts? Danny! Hi, darling. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm gonna move my water closer to me. Okay. I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna mute the alerts. Okay, mutes are things. Sound alerts. That's what I needed to do. Hold on. Better be safe than sorry, chat. You know what I always say. Better be safe than sorry. Okay, log in with Twitch. Yes, obviously I'm logging in with Twitch. I'm not logging in with MySpace. Anyone else use MySpace in here? I've never used it. Okay, where's the button? Oh, I forgot I had all of these. Oh my gosh. The hey sexy lady. That is one of my things. That is funny. I didn't even know that. Dinar! It's Dinar! Slay. Okie dokie. Back to it, y'all. I'm skipping this song. I don't know why I even have it on here. I feel like I don't listen to it that much. Anywho. Alright. Oh my gosh. I had to scroll through a little bit because I had forgot what happened in chapter 4. But, slay. We're good. Okay, so, shall we do our good old fave time of the fic? A lore recap, if you will. I know it's down for a lore recap, but I know it's probably been a while since, you know, I'm gonna do it anyway. Y'all don't have to even say anything. I just know. I can read y'all's minds. I'm gonna tell y'all to think of a color. I'm gonna guess the first color that comes to blue. Did I get it? Was that the color you were thinking of? Hi, Chelsea. Hello, love. Welcome to the stream. All right. I'm gonna speed run. This lore recap. Okay, chapter 1. Techno, a CIA agent who was hired by Phil and trained by Phil specially. He's now known as Syndicate Blade. Chapter 1, he's hired to protect Tommy, who is Phil's nephew. Thank goodness for lore recap. I wasn't here. That's okay, Blue. Now that you're here now, you can go to my VODs channel and read and listen through my SBI Sunday streams. The bios have what fics I read in that thing. So if you want to search for them, go right ahead, my guy. It is all you. Okay, so Tommy is a young teenage boy with a heart condition. Techno is hired to, or tasked to watch over him because Phil's home location in Hong Kong was revealed to the public, and so bad guys are after him because Phil works for the CIA. And apparently, if you work in the CIA, everyone's after you because government stuff. I have it up for already. Oh, amazing, Blue. You're already ahead of the game. Gold star. So basically, Techno is like having to deal with this annoying kid, and he's just a pain in the ass, but he's so like endearing at the same time. Kristen, who is Tommy's caretaker, like steps out for a bit. Tommy has a little problem with his pacemaker or heart, and so Techno has to take him to the ER, and like, bro, like he's fine, like we'll take care of him. The doctors were all like, and so Techno's like, oh shoot, I care about this kid now. Like I can't let anything bad happen to him because also Phil would kill me, and Phil is also Techno's father figure in this. So later when Tommy, Kristen, and Techno are back at Phil's house after the hospital visit, there's like a guy that breaks in, and Techno totally kicks his ass. Well, Tommy doesn't even like realize, like he's in the back of the room of the house, and then when he's annoying at first, but yeah, he's a sweet kid. And then Techno and Tommy have this like moment of like, hey, are you okay? And he's like, oh yeah, like just another Thursday. Like that's their thing. Keep that in your brain. Chapter 2, it's like 2 years later, and Techno is tasked to assassinate this guy, aka Puns, and his partner, Techno's partner for this mission, is none other than our very own Wibbler Suit. So Wibbler Suit is there, and so Techno doesn't kill the guy because there's like a kid nearby, and he's like, okay, the gun jammed. Schlatt and George not found. Sorry, should I say trigger warning Dream Team? They're bad. We don't like them. We don't like them in this fic, so don't worry, guys. Justice will be served. Yes, so basically, there's like a medallion with like a chip in it, and Techno needs, or they're trying to get that because Schlatt needs it because it's got some information on there. And Techno's like, hey, yo, like, I don't know about this, bro. So Techno's on the run. Wilbur's like, I don't know if I trust him now. They're sending out like people after Techno, which is where Dream comes in. And Dream is this psycho guy who uses the government, the CIA, like army stuff, and basically uses it to his own advantage to just kill whoever he wants. It's rough, buddy. It's like bad juju stuff. I'm sorry, I don't know why I said that. I apologize for using that word. It's very bad stuff. And so, yeah, Techno's on the run. Wilbur eventually comes around and teams up with Techno, and I'm getting ahead of myself because now we are past that. So this is where Techno is on the run at this point. Okay. So, let's get into it. All right. Psychopath. Yes, very sociopathic behavior. He is not good. All right. The Pink Man by Download Online, Juliberry. Trigger warning, torture and minor character death. Don't even worry about this minor character death. He shows up for one chapter and then he goes away. Kind of like Sam and reference to future chapters, but we're fine. Don't worry about it, chat. Don't worry about it. All right. Chapter 4. By the time Techno reached Vienna, he'd caught up on some much-needed sleep. And when he got off the train with the rest of the crowd, he knew it'd be simple to slip into a stream of tourists and other frequent travelers. He had to be careful, though. They'd all be after him now. The last time he'd been in Vienna was for a mission he'd done about a year ago, but he still had a go bag in one of the various city storage centers, and he knew he needed supplies. It was dangerous to be on the run without a weapon, especially with trained assassins on his tail, so that would have to be his first stop. Eventually, after weaving his way through endless street corners and alleyways, he finally made it, asking for his key from the clerk before making his way to the double green doors of the storage locker. Hi, Pepper. Hello. He opened it, glancing around as he did, just to make sure no one was watching him before slipping inside the unit. Within sat a black backpack, which he carefully bent down and unzipped, sifting through the familiar contents with ease. A standard issue pistol, a compass, a change of clothes, about 10,000 US dollars, and finally a pocket-sized address book. He took it in his hands, carefully thumbing through the pages before finding the page he was looking for. There at the top of the page, in Phil's scribbly black handwriting, is scrawled the words "dry cleaner," followed by a name and an address. His ticket out of here. His ticket to finding Tommy. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, guys, they kidnapped Phil and Tommy in this fic, so that's why Techno's like that's the motive. I can't believe I left that out of the lore explanation, the lore recap. Ipsy! Anyways, his ticket to finding Tommy. He read it twice before memorizing it, but just as he was about to place the address book back in the backpack, a folded piece of paper slipped out of the pages. He caught it just as it was about to hit the floor, his finger snagging underneath its creased edge before slowly thumbing it open. He gently smoothed out the paper with a hand and stared down at its surface, a familiar face staring back at him. It was a drawing, graphite lines crisscrossing one another to form his portrait. Light pencil marks made up the lines of his face, a messy tangle of his braid, stray strands of hair falling into his eyes. He remembered when Tommy had given it to him just as he was about to step out the door, Phil standing behind him in the kitchen as they saw him off, their week together finally coming to a close. I thought something was missing. Yeah, that's what was. I feel like I missed something. What's going on? So I'm kind of slow. No worries, Pepper. We're reading chapter 4 of The Pink Man. We're reading chapter 4 because I realized I didn't I didn't read it yet. Oopsie. So that's what we're doing. And we just did a lore recap. So yeah. Hopefully you can catch back on. The week together finally coming to a close. Here, Tommy had said with an embarrassed blush, eyes tucked underneath his blonde bangs as he ducked his head sheepishly. In case you fucking forget me while you're gone. Fuck. Techno grimaced, something clenching at his heart as he gently folded the paper back up along its creases and placed it back into the pages of the book, tucking it into his bag for safekeeping. Then he zipped it up and threw it over his shoulder, exiting the storage locker without a second glance backwards. Backward. That is a single word. He made his way through the streets of Vienna, glancing over his shoulder every now and then, but thankfully the address wasn't far. The gun now tucked into his belt also made him feel better, but he'd rather avoid getting into a shootout altogether. He was still tired, even after sleeping on the train, and he could feel his nerves getting shot, his skin prickling with exhaustion. The last thing he needed was to get into another fight. If he did, he wasn't sure he'd be able to make it out another time. Still, no one bothered him to give him a second glance as he walked, and eventually his feet made it to the doorway of an apartment building before he turned the handle and let himself inside, walking up a few flights of stairs and coming to a stop at a wooden door with a golden peephole at the center. Techno immediately set his bag down before giving the door a couple of sharp knocks, then digging into his pocket and pulling out a roll of cash. He heard a sharp sliding sound as someone opened the peephole on the other side of the door before a voice came through the wood. "What do you want?" It was sharp, skeptical, maybe even a bit on edge. And if Techno was being honest, he couldn't really blame the guy. He was feeling the same way. I got dry cleaning, he replied flatly. Jeez Louise, I can't talk. This is what I get for skipping SBI Sundays. I got dry cleaning, he replied flatly. What wash setting we talking here? The man asked, his voice relaxing just a little. I want the works. Starch, clean, press, and I want it same-day service, Techno said. Can you do it or what? There was a slight hesitation through the door before the man finally called back to him. It's a very expensive laundry list. His voice was half intrigued and half skeptical, and Techno immediately took one of the rolls of cash he was holding and stuck it into the peephole, slamming a hand against the door to get it to the other side before holding up a larger roll of cash in front of it. There was a stiff pause. No doubt the man staring at the money in Techno's hand before his voice finally came back through the door. You seem like a man who wants his shirts done right. Emmy, thank you so much for the sub. 17 months, Pog. Big Pog. Hearts in chat for Emmy Artsy, everyone. The man who does it all. Where'd I go? Where'd I leave? Okay. You seem like a man who wants his shirts done right. Then Techno listened as the peephole snapped shut before a series of locks were being turned, clicks running carefully down the side of the door before it finally opened, revealing a man with dark hair, the tips of which were dyed an electric blue. His robe matched the color, and he carefully pushed the edge of it out of the way to reveal a small handgun sticking out the front of his pants, showing Techno he was armed. Techno raised an unimpressed eyebrow. Skeppy, I assume? He asked. I'm in a bit of a hurry. The man smiled, beckoning him inside, saying, Of course, right this way. Skeppy began leading him down the staircase, and Techno's eyes grazed over the room. It was dank and dimly lit, with a cement floor and a camera set up toward the middle of the room. Tables were overflowing with papers and boxed-up wires, several computer setups sitting at the far side of the room, and a wash area in the corner. It was nothing special, just your average hermit operation. But there was something slightly comforting about being inside again, away from prying eyes and crowded streets. I'm also going to need to get into a secure system, he added, as they reached the landing, wondering if he'd have to dig out more cash for the request, and he heard Skeppy let out a small chuckle. Huh, sure, the man replied easily. You really are the, full buffet, aren't you? Skeppy suddenly swung back around to look at Techno, scanning him up and down with a mischievous twinkle in his eye. Something about his gaze slightly unsettling. and Techno couldn't help but tense up a little. The dry cleaning thing was a code, and Techno's little book of addresses was actually Phil's guide to navigating through the world undetected. But that didn't always mean the people he'd written down were trustworthy. Cobblers, as they were called, did what they did for money. There was no loyalty there, no trust. At minimum, it was a business transaction. At maximum, it could become something much, much worse. And Techno had already had enough maximums for the past 2 days. He didn't like providing information to someone he barely knew, particularly about himself. But for all he knew, Tommy could be running out of time, and this was the quickest way to find him. Maybe the only way. Have fun. I have homework. Good luck on your math homework. I hope you enjoy the VOD when you watch it. Mwah. Bye, Chelsea. I do passports over there, Skeppy continued, pointing to the camera setup. And, well, let's do this thing first, he said quickly, trotting over to one of the desktop setups and cracking his knuckles before bending down over a keyboard. Then he turned back to look at Techno, who was still standing at the bottom of the stairs, unmoving, before gesturing into a nearby seat. You can sit if you want. But Techno couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his chest, and his eyes suddenly fell on an open door across the room, so he quickly started towards it. Where are you going? He heard Skeppy ask behind him, but he was already ducking his head inside the room, glancing around to see if it was clear. It was, but nothing but tangles of wires and old storage boxes. And when he turned back around, Skeppy was staring at him with a raised eyebrow. Techno ignored him, stepping back into the room just as the man asked, "What's the secure system?" "Nether Electronics," Techno replied, making his way to a door on the other side of the room as Skeppy typed the name into his system. "And here, it's medical supplies," he announced with a bit of confusion, turning just as Techno reached the slab of wood and jostled the lock handle before ordering, Don't touch that door!" Techno turned back around to face the mysterious man, his expression now slightly annoyed by the agents prying into his home. But Techno couldn't help it. He supposed Skeppy had secrets too, things he didn't trust with anyone else, things he had to keep hidden because of who he was, and that was something Techno understood better than most. But that wouldn't keep him from looking over his shoulder at every possible turn. "Yeah, I'm looking for a pacemaker," he finally said. "I can get you a serial number," Skeppy offered instantly. Techno nodded, the knot of anxiety slowly coming undone in his chest as he replied, "That's all I need." Then, at least, he'd be one step closer. Skeppy lifted an eyebrow, and Techno couldn't help but wonder if the man had noticed the subtle tonal shift in his voice, the way the words had softened. But if he had, he said nothing about it. "Name?" he asked instead. Techno stared at him for a moment, clenching his jaw. He hated this position, feeling powerless, putting his fate into the hands of a stranger. But he had to get to Tommy. He had to. So hesitantly, the name left his lips, a name he hadn't said out loud in a very, very long time. "Watson," he said gently, something tugging uncomfortably at his heartstrings. "Tommy Watson." Skeppy stared at him blankly for a moment before gesturing toward his computer and saying, "This'll be a minute." Techno nodded absently. "I'm getting that," he said dryly. "Why don't you get yourself cleaned up before we take your pictures?" Skeppy suggested, swiveling back around in his seat and bending back over his keyboard. "Unless," he added, already typing, "bloody and beaten is the kind of look you're going for." Techno rolled his eyes and glanced over at the sink in the corner before walking over to it. A curtain hung on a rail around the area. He quickly pulled it around, blocking his view of Skeppy, but at least he could still hear the man clacking away on his keyboard. The sink's counter was full of medical and cleaning supplies, and Techno was almost positive he wasn't the first person to walk through the door with cuts and bruises on his body. He quickly dug the change of clothes out of his bag, a gray coat and a white t-shirt, before glancing up in the little round mirror above the sink to inspect himself. When he did, he saw that the extraction team on the plane gotten in a few good hits. There was a cut above his right brow, and his temple was split on the left, both wounds crusted with dried blood. Blood? Whoa. He could feel his ribs aching too, his whole body throbbing, and he let out a sigh as he glanced down at his bloody knuckles. He really couldn't take much more of this. He cleaned his hands first, wiping his knuckles clean, the open wounds stinging underneath the running water, before finally pulling off his borrowed jacket and inspecting his ribs. They were bruised, but nothing too serious, and his eyes easily skipped over the old scars that littered his arms and torso, all of them white and faded, long since forgotten. Then after he'd cleaned the cuts on his face, he slipped on his new change of clothes. He looked better, although his hair was an absolute wreck, and before he could think about it twice, he was pulling out the hair tie, his fingers slowly unwinding the pink strands before combing his fingers through and lacing it back up again. Then he let out a tiny huff of satisfaction and pulled back the curtain. And just as he did, Skeppy swiveled back toward him in his chair and turned the monitor to face him. Voila! He said proudly, standing up and gesturing to the screen. Techno raised an eyebrow. Already? He asked, mildly impressed. Oh yeah, Skeppy replied with a reassuring nod. With this setup, I could read the Pope's diary if I wanted to. Uh-huh, Techno grunted, moving toward the monitor and grabbing for a pen, sitting in a glass jar on Skeppy's desk. He studied the serial number on the screen and began to scrawl it out on his palm in choppy handwriting. Which I don't, Skeppy added quickly. Now, I'm gonna pause here for a second to make note of this pen. This pen is like godly. And Danny can confirm this because in later chapters, you'll see why. You'll see why. Oh my gosh. It still makes me laugh. Okay, hold on. I need to get some chapstick. It's on the other side of the room. Hold on. Man. Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay, I got my chapstick. Any chapstick enjoyers? Lamau, the ink lasts forever. It's forever ink, bro. It's forever ink. It's just magic. Whoever wants long-lasting ink, you need to get this pen. Oh my gosh. Anywho. Alright. Okay, we left here. Oh, hold on. There we go. Techno grunted again, and Skeppy turned on his heel and began walking toward the other side of his desk. A line of passports laid across it. So, which great nation would you like to hail from? He asked, fingering through the tiny booklets. Denmark? New Zealand? Japan? Non-extradition and somewhere snowy would be nice, Techno said absently, finishing off the number and placing the pen back in its jar. Northern Stacey are so straight up fine. Don't be shy, tell us the brand. Sharpie? I don't know. Non-extradition and somewhere snowy would be nice, Techno said absently, finishing off the number and placing the pen back in its jar. You want Iceland? Skeppy said with a grin. Have you been there? They have this drink there called the Malt og Appelsin. I don't even know if I said that right. And it's only served around the holidays for Christmas. Let me see the passport, Techno interrupted impatiently. Yeah, Techno said. Whoa, Skeppy said quickly, although he rambled on, with a very unselfish splash of citrus. There you are, he finished, picking up the passport and handing it over to Techno. And it's a must. Techno ignored him, thumbing open the passport to examine it. It was a great forgery, and he was sure that Skeppy could probably pull off printing a fake name into the pages perfectly, along with his photograph. You cleaned up very well, Skeppy suddenly commented. Like I said, I'm in a hurry, Techno replied. He was itching to get out of here and find the nearest hospital so he could type in the serial number and find out where the fuck Dream took Tommy. Ugh. Sorry, I just had to get that out of my system. Slay. You can stand over there, Skeppy said, gesturing aimlessly toward the camera on the other end of the room. Techno quickly walked over to it, standing in front of the white screen behind him and looking toward the camera with his bag still in his hands. You need an alias, Skeppy started, walking over to one of the flashbulbs standing and turning it on, washing the dimly lit room into a bright light. And it needs to be something very, very easy to forget. You can step on the rug, he added, pointing to the ground at Techno's feet. Something like, John, Dave. Yes, that is a reference. Thomas is also a very common name in Iceland. Techno couldn't help but glare daggers at the man, both of them knowing full well that he just touched a nerve. But Skeppy just smirked and stepped over to the camera, saying, "It has to disappear into the wash of the hippocampus." "Let's go," Techno said impatiently, cutting him off. "I'm all talked out, all right? Take the picture." "Sure," Skeppy said, obligingly, although he rambled on. "Unless the desired response is emotion." He pressed down on the camera and the bulbs around Techno flashed, blinding him momentarily. "Like, Skeppy continued. Hope, anger, fear." The bulbs flashed again, and Techno tensed, quickly blinking the light from his eyes before his gaze settled back on Skeppy. But the man was still standing at his camera, seemingly harmless from this far away. Can you take a step forward towards me, please?" he asked, and Techno glanced around cautiously before following his instructions. Something felt off. Something wasn't right. Yes, what? Don't you just love listening to Julie read and then she starts... No! Oh my gosh. Bro, Julie ASMR when? And it's just me making these just terrible noises. Oh my gosh. How much money do you think I can make from that? Just a YouTube channel just for that. I don't know. I hope it's a lot though. Can you take a step forward? Why can't I talk? Can you take a step towards me, please? He asked, and Techno glanced around cautiously before following his instructions. Something felt off. Something wasn't right. Yes, that's good, Skeppy said, and Techno couldn't help but cast his eyes behind him, a cold chill crawling up his spine. The only problem with that sort of alias is that the emotional memory has a staying power. Techno's eyes snapped forward, landing on Skeppy again. The man's friendly grin still plastered onto his face before he finally drawled. And you know all about notoriety, don't you, Blade? Techno's eyes widened slightly, a million alarm bells ringing in his head, but before he could even make a move, Skeppy had slammed his foot down on a pedal, and suddenly the floor underneath Techno's feet gave way, and he was free falling. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for the ground to meet him, and he landed on his back, the wind rushing out of his lungs all at once, as he was slammed into the stone floor. He immediately coughed, practically gasping for air as he lay on the cold floor, his head spinning with pain. If his ribs weren't bruised before, they definitely were now, and he quickly rolled onto his side, still coughing from the burning in his lungs. Crap. He should have known better than to trust this greasy blue-haired cobbler. After a few more moments, he finally glanced above him, seeing Skeppy staring at him from behind a glass enclosure that had folded over his exit. "All right," he called down to Techno, a grin still on his face. "Trapdoor," Techno grunted, finally catching his breath and glaring back up at the man. "Unexpected." Skeppy dug into his robe pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, and Techno spotted his code name printed at the top and a reward scrawled across the bottom. The official stamp of the Bureau tagged into the corner. He was officially wanted by the CIA. "Someone is very upset with you, man," Skeppy said happily, dangling the piece of paper above Techno as the agent slowly dragged himself into his sitting position. He coughed again, and this time the taste of blood came with it. "Well, now I'm upset with them," Techno groaned, reaching into his bag and stealthily grabbing for his gun before rising unsteadily to his feet. "A 5 and 7 zeros worth," Skeppy exclaimed excitedly, holding up 7 fingers toward Techno, beaming brightly like a child who just won a bag of Smarties. 50 million? Techno grimaced, letting out an inward sigh of defeat. You gotta be fucking kidding me. That was a lot of money. Too much. If he was pricing himself, too much if he was pricing himself, but it meant that everyone in the world would be after him now. Every freelance killer, every mercenary, But none of that would even matter if he didn't get the hell out of here. So he turned sharply on his heel, raising his gun towards Skeppy's face and firing twice. But the bullets only ricocheted off the glass above him, and he quickly ducked his head into the stone wall as they slammed into the floor at his feet. Skeppy said, wagging a finger. The man hadn't even flinched, the two bullets only causing minor cracks in the bulletproof glass that separated him from Techno. Techno let out a grunt of frustration, clenching his jaw as he pressed his forehead into the cool stone of the wall. How did he wind up here? How did it come to this? How was he going to save Tommy now? Then above him, Skeppy called out, "Hey!" Techno turned his eyes upward to glare at him, his eyes burning with angry fire. But the man only grinned, lowering a digital camera toward the glass and singing, "Smile." Oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? This chapter's been out for a while. I think y'all know what happens. And also, the movie this is based on is on Netflix. If you haven't watched it yet, go watch it. Why aren't the Russos paying me and Danny money right now? We've been promoting their movie since last summer. I'm just saying we deserve some compensation here. Clip this and send this to the Russo brothers. Russo, hey, Anthony, Joe, listen to me, buddies. Me and my bestie, we've been doing a lot for you and you don't even know. I just want something in return. I would like a lot of money, a little cottage out in the forest that can room 5 people, and a pool. I don't know, man. I hope we can negotiate these terms. Anyhow, let us continue on, because it's time for Wilbur. It's Wibbler time. Alright. Wilbur sat in a cold, dimly lit office at the CIA station in Berlin, patiently waiting for the center chief to arrive. The flight there from Bangkok had taken about 12 hours, half a day, and Wilbur couldn't help but wonder where Blade was now. No doubt still at large, since Wilbur was here and not back in the field. But he couldn't help but think about what the agent had been up to since they'd last spoken. He most likely slipped away into some foreign country somewhere and changed all his credentials so he couldn't be found or tracked down. Obviously, he was giving the CIA a hard time finding him, but Wilbur couldn't help but secretly hope that he'd successfully gotten away and was now hiding out in Ecuador or Iceland or Antarctica, somewhere far away from all this. Oh yeah, we made him go for Iceland because the Antarctic Empire. Oh my gosh. We do all the references here, y'all. We just know. Alright. That was when the door opened, and the center chief stepped in, eyes dark with fury, a file in one hand and a bag in the other. He didn't say anything. Simply walked over to Wilbur's side and slid the file across the table, a giant red slash over its center, and began unpacking the bag. It was a black box, a recording device with a tiny microphone stand, and Schlatt set it up easily, trained hands moving over the device and connecting wires. Then he leaned forward and set the microphone in front of Wilbur, glancing him up and down once. "They don't usually come this attractive," he commented, though his expression remained blank and unfeeling. Wilbur glared up at him through his curly bangs, a frown tugging at the corner of his lips. "That's cold harassment," he retorted bitterly. Schlatt let out a soft chuckle. "If you think that's harassment, you better buckle up," he snarked, before placing his finger down on the device in front of him and pressing record. Wilbur said nothing, still glaring. Even though Greenland's color, whoever named them aren't this. You are so right. You're so valid for saying that. Oh my gosh. That's right. Greenland is colder than Iceland's green. Yeah, I remember that from geography. Wilbur said nothing, still glaring up at him from where he sat. He wasn't scared of the center chief, even though he probably should have been. No, he was pissed off. Secrecy and suspicion wasn't anything new. It sort of came with the job. But ever since Blade had gotten himself into this mess, it had gotten 1,000 times worse. And if Wilbur didn't figure out what was going on soon, he was going to start ripping his hair out. "Tell me," Schlatt said calmly, starting off the interrogation. What was your first clue Syndicate Blade was going to break procedure? Wilbur didn't hesitate, the answer coming to his lips with ease. When he didn't show at the exfil. Not when he chased the target across a flotilla? Schlatt said skeptically, raising an unconvinced eyebrow. Wilbur stared him down, keeping his tone tight and professional. Blade did his job until he didn't, he replied. Schlatt tilted his head, eyes flashing menacingly as he countered. He intentionally blew an op that wasn't prepped to be executed at distance. I know, Wilbur cut in impatiently. I prepped it. And that whole time, he began condescendingly, waving a hand in the air. You had no reason... hold on. You had no reason to believe he had another agenda besides the op? Wilbur stared at him for a moment, hoping he was conveying enough smug distaste for the man in his eyes alone, before simply stating, no. Schlatt didn't break eye contact with Wilbur as he leaned down and hit the stop button on the recording device, his whole demeanor changing with the release of evidence, his voice taking on an icy tone as he leveled a glare at Wilbur and said, Let's talk life goals, officer. Then he turned his back on him, stuffing his hands in his pockets as he paced around the room. I went from Harvard to analysis to the DO's desk in 8 years. It's never been done before. I did it, he bragged, jabbing a finger into his chest. I did it by not allowing the weakness of others to drag me down. He lowered his gaze, eyes sharpening as his glare bore into Wilbur. Syndicate Blade stole an asset of considerable value to the agency. If you had any idea this was coming and you withheld it, your life goals, should you have any, would suffer incalculable damage. Incalculable damage. Wilbur stared back at him, unfazed by his authoritative cockiness, but the Center Chief had already revealed more information than he should have. He slipped up, and now Wilbur knew exactly what was going on. I never even met Blade until I landed in Bangkok, he stated smoothly, and no one said anything about a retrieval. What's the asset? The Center Chief pursed his lips, realizing his mistake too late, before ignoring Wilbur and asking him flat out, Do you know where Blade is? Wilbur shook his head. No, he replied honestly. Schlatt stared him down for a moment, as if trying to debate whether or not he was telling the truth, before he nodded toward the table and said, Open that file. Wilbur didn't take his eyes off the chief as he pulled the folder toward him, only looking down as he'd finally opened it. But inside, there was nothing. Just air. And Wilbur couldn't help but let out an unamused snort at the theatrics of it all. Schlatt continued, gesturing toward the file as he stated, In a career spanning 2 decades, that's all we have on your partner Blade. Wait, 2 decades. Danny, do we have to change that? Do we have to change that? We changed the time jump recently, guys. I'm just gonna keep going. In a career spanning 2 decades, that's all we have on your partner Blade. Wilbur said nothing, but he couldn't help but feel slightly smug. Blade was good. Really good. And even if they... Yeah, probably. Okay, we took it took like 10 minutes for Danny to explain to me what the difference in the time jump would be now. It was so funny. Because it's like, instead of when Phil found Techno and to where we are in the present now, it's 8 years. But when Techno met Tommy, that was 6 years from that moment. Because then it's 2 years later here. So, in a career spanning 8 years, that's all we have on your partner Blade. Yes, I love math. I'm so good at it, guys. All right. Anywho. In a career spanning 8 years, that's all we have on your partner Blade. Wilbur said nothing, but he couldn't help but feel slightly smug. Blade was good. Really good. And even if the agency knew nothing about him before, at least now they knew how good he really was. Tracking him down was going to be far from a walk in the park. And if Wilbur was being honest, he was kind of starting to root for the man. What do you know about the Syndicate program? Schlatt finally asked, slowly making his way back over to where Wilbur was sitting. Wilbur shrugged absently. Okay, it's edited if you really want to refresh. Okay. I'll refresh. Hey, it changed! Let's go! Everyone, shout out to Danny. Hearts in chat for Danny. Yippee! Who knew fanficking had so much math? Bro. It really does. Like, if you want your world to be consistent within, like, the timeline and not mess up people's ages, this is the way to go. You gotta learn math. You gotta study things. You can't just... I mean, if you want your fic to be good, you don't always have to do research. You can always just do it and have people point out the inconsistencies. But it's like... it's a lot. Danny's been watching documentaries of this Netflix series on something new she's gonna do after we're done with this. We have notes with the entire time. This is true! We do! But yeah, it takes research if you want to write something. Yay, hearts! Wait, I want to put one too. I want to put the Julie love emote because I love Danny. Yippee! Anywho, what do you know about the syndicate program? Schlatt finally asked, slowly making his way back over to where Wilbur was sitting. Wilbur shrugged absently. Reckless mystery men you guys send in when you can't officially send in anyone else, he responded. Schlatt smirked. The gray man, he stated, throwing up a hand in the air. Your predecessor's idea. He founded a program to recruit hardened criminals, commuting their sentences in exchange for a lifelong commitment to the agency. Assets were chosen for their skill set, lack of family, and plausible deniability. Identities permanently destroyed. Nameless assassins with limited morality. I mean, what could possibly go wrong, right? Wilbur stared at Schlatt. Doubt suddenly sweeping into his thoughts. He was right. Blade had been a criminal before all this. Before everything. What if it had all been an act? What if he'd gone off book on purpose? What if he really had just taken the asset for himself and left Wilbur in the dust to deal with the consequences? Every single syndicate flamed out, Schlatt continued softly, suddenly stepping up to Wilbur's side before squatting down to look him in the eye. All dead or back in prison. Blade is the last of the dirty half dozen. And he is 100% conforming to the pattern. Then he reached out and placed a steady hand on Wilbur's shoulder as he whispered with a sickening amount of false sympathy. He hurts people because that's who he is. He raised his eyebrows. That's who you're protecting. Wilbur set his jaw, leaning forward a little to glare down at Schlatt before finally saying, his tone full of disgust, "Remove yourself from my personal space. Please." Schlatt smirked back at him, but still lifted his hand from Wilbur's shoulder, patting it twice as he rounded his chair and made his way back over to the recording device. Wilbur let out a silent breath of relief before watching the man click the stop button once more, starting the recording process back up again as he fell into the leather chair beside Wilbur. "Officer, I have reason to believe you're not being truthful in this debrief, and as such, I must recommend you be suspended from field duty," Schlatt said coolly. Wilbur scowled, nostrils furrowing. "I want to talk to my COS," he started, but Schlatt quickly cut him off. "I already did. She's lost confidence in you," he retorted, raising a hand and pressing the stop button once more before raising his eyes to glare at Wilbur again. "Am I jarring your memory yet?" he inquired smugly. But before Wilbur could even think of a reply, there was the soft sound of a phone vibrating, and Schlatt let out a small sigh before pulling the cell from his back pocket, his other hand going to his breast pocket to pull out a set of reading glasses. Wilbur raised a curious, half-amused eyebrow at him as he folded them open and pushed them onto the bridge of his nose. But if Schlatt saw the look, he didn't register it. Instead, he opened his phone and scrolled through his messages as he pulled up the most recent one. Wilbur stared at the glare of the screen reflected off of his lenses, reading the message backwards and committing it to memory. Blade found. 14A, Hundertsweiser, Vienna. I'm not even gonna hope that I said that right. Then Schlatt let out another sigh and started getting up, quickly unplugging the recording device and stuffing it under his arm before looking back at Wilbur and ordering, "Stick around the building. The boys aren't done searching your apartment yet." But as Wilbur watched him go, he already knew that wasn't going to happen. After all, he had places to be and a rogue agent to catch. Wilbur's on the way to save Techno. Let's go. Yippee! Okay. Oh boy. Wait. Oh, okay. Dream had packed Phil onto a stuffy private plane, along with the rest of his merry band of mercenaries, and had taken the seat directly across from him. Oh, if only so the two blonde men could shoot menacing glares back and forth at one another every now and then. But for the most part, they sat in silence. At first, Dream had tried to start up what could be considered a friendly chat, but after about a half hour of trying and failing to get Philza to speak, the man had just let out a bored sigh and slouched back in his chair. Now Philza warily watched the man as the man dozed in his comfy white leather seat, and silently wished he could wring his hands around his throat. "Me too, Phil." "Tommy," he wanted to demand. "Where the fuck is Tommy?" Then suddenly one of Dream's soldiers came traipsing walking up the aisle. Fuck. I'm sorry. I think I got it right the first time. And stopped beside the man before saying in a gentle voice, "They found him." Philza felt his heart plummet slightly, his jaw clenching as he gripped the fabric of his pants tighter. Fuck. This wasn't good. It only taken them half a day to track him down, maybe less. "Who's the closest to him?" Dream asked without opening his eyes, and Philza found his gaze darting back toward his captor anxiously. "We are," the mercenary replied. Dream's eyes slowly opened, a sick smile coming to rest on his face, and Philza's stomach churned with unease. Then Dream was standing and walking toward the cockpit, and Philza couldn't help but glance up at the mercenary that stood before him. He was tall, strong, and clearly well trained. They all were, and Philza couldn't help but wonder which one of them would be the one to put a bullet through his son's head. Oh! I forgot about that! I'm crying. Techno. He grit his teeth tighter. "We needed to ground in Vienna," he heard Dream's voice filter through the cabin. There was a muffled argument that ensued, the pilots probably telling Dream that getting flight clearance in mid-air was a near impossibility, as well as something they could potentially lose their licenses over, before a gunshot resounded through the plane, a scream of pain coming with it. Philza couldn't help but flinch at the noise, his nerves already on edge, his heart pounding in his chest, and before he could stop himself, he found himself praying slightly that he'd see Tommy again, just one more time. "How do you feel about your license?" he heard Dream snark from the cockpit, and then the man was turning around and coming back down the aisle of the plane, asking with a stiff smile, "Who's up for some Tafelschmitz?" Bro, Dream's such an asshole in this fic. You love to hate him. You really do. Anywho. Techno had already come up with a plan on how to get out of the well. Although it was a crazy, damn near impossible one. But then again, most of his plans were. He'd sifted through the contents of his backpack, trying to see if he could make use of anything within. He had a battery-operated lantern, food reserves, a pocket-sized toolkit, medical supplies, and a rusty pair of old scissors. But nothing that would get him through the bulletproof glass. He let out a sigh before his eyes caught onto a few pipes, drilled into the floor across from him, probably having something to do with water, seeing that he was in a well. But slowly a plan started rolling out in his head. First, he took the scissors in hand and leaned over the smaller of the pipes, begging to saw through the crusted metal. It wasn't too difficult, the pipe being as delicate and rusted as it was, but it still required a lot of force. As my dad would say, he's just overall unpleasant. Shout out to your dad, Pepper. Oh my gosh. Excuse me. Luckily he was able to manage, and after he'd cut a nice ring around the metal, it only took one kick for the pipe to give way, snapping off and leaving him with its nozzle. Steam poured out of what was still attached to the floor, but the warmth was welcoming compared to the constant chill of his stone-cold cell. Next, he pulled his pistol back into his hands and released the clip, pushing several bullets out with a thumb and gathering them in the palm of his hand. From there, it was about getting them open, piling the powder and the shells into some medical gauze before tying it up with a shoelace. Then he reached for the pipe nozzle and began the bag of placed the bag of gunpowder snugly inside. Now for the tricky part, he muttered to himself softly. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. Techno pulled off his laceless shoes, yanking off his sock before stuffing it inside the nozzle as well. Behind the gunpowder before grabbing for his gun again and cocking it back so the bullet was in the chamber. Then carefully, he fit the barrel of the gun into the nozzle and began wrapping it up with medical tape, making sure the two were firmly attached. Lastly, he used some old paracord to tie a knot around the handle of the gun and then around the trigger before leaning back to inspect his work. It wasn't exactly the best makeshift bomb he'd ever made, but it would do. Then his eyes glanced back over at the larger of the pipes in the corner, and he let out a heavy sigh, knowing that this one was going to be a little bit harder to break. He glanced around on the floor around him, feeling around the edges of the stone floor, before he finally found a loose rock and began pulling it out of its cemented seams. After a few tries, it came loose, and from there, it was onto the pipe. He stood, rising to his feet with a slight groan, his joints protesting against the physical effort, but he still managed to walk over to the metal tubing and leaned over it, staring at the bolts that fastened it together. Then, he raised the stone over his head and murmured, "Please let this be easy," before beginning to slam away at the metal. It only took about 20 swings before the bolt finally broke free and water came spurting out of the pipe, hitting Techno directly in the face. He sputtered, taking a couple steps backward. But slowly he watched as the water began to fill up the bottom of the well, and he hefted the homemade explosive over his shoulder. Now it was just a waiting game. He could only hope he'd be out of here by the time someone came to kill him, so long as he didn't drown first. But he still snapped his scissors in half, palming the blades just in case. Dude. Techno's a freaking god. Oh wait, I drank water. That's a little slurp slurp moment. Patience wasn't one of Dream's virtues, if he had any virtues at all. So by the time his team had pulled up to this is so American. It really is. Oh my gosh. Techno making a homemade bomb trapped in a well. That's so American. Oh my gosh. So by the time his team had pulled up to the Vienna apartment that Schlatt had directed them to, he was already fed up with this Blade character. His time and money were too valuable of a thing to be wasted on this annoyingly defective agent. All he needed was to find out where the asset was and dig Blade a grave. Then he'd get his payout from Schlatt and he could go take a long vacation somewhere sunny. But when his soldiers finally kicked down the door of the apartment, Dream wasn't met with Blade. Rather, a blue-haired man knitting on a sofa in the middle of the room, his eyes wide with surprise at the mercenary's sudden appearance. "I would have opened it," the man stated, as Dream took a menacing step towards him, his handgun resting over his chest, a silencer attached to its end. "Where's the target?" he demanded in a whisper, not sure which corner Blade could be lurking around. He'd already taken out Puns and a whole extraction team, and the last thing Dream was going to do was underestimate a man with one of the highest kill counts in company history. The blue-haired man narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "Where's my money?" he countered. Dream stared at him for a second, but whatever non-existent patience he had left was already long gone. So he just raised his pistol and let out a few shots ring loose, killing the cobbler where he sat, and letting the blood from his chest slowly seep into the couch. Then he raised his gun and signaled for his team to sweep the apartment, and they spread out to search the place, armed men ducking their heads into various rooms before they finally made their way toward the stairs. Can we get some 07s in chat for Skeppy? Rip Skeppy, I guess. Dream didn't follow them, waiting at the top of the landing as his men slowly inspected the floor below. But he could see the trapdoor from where he stood, no doubt where the cobbler had managed to capture his $50 million prize. And sure enough, as two of his men approached, the pane of bulletproof glass in its floor, one of them called back up toward Dream. He got caught in the well. I'll have to watch the VOD. Oh, do you have to head out, Manny? Well, enjoy the VOD, Manny. I hope you have a good rest of your night. Mwah. But just as the men began to lower their weapons toward the glass... Oh, Skeppy. Skeppy's got... I'm sorry. Oh, hello, first-time chatter Peach. Welcome to the stream. Rip Skeppy. Gone too soon. 07s. Dream is evil, dude. No, I just missed a ton. Oh, okay. No worries, man. No worries. You're all good. But welcome, Peach. I hope you're having a great rest of... I hope you're having a great day. Alright, but just as the men began to lower their weapons toward the glass, an explosion burst from the trapdoor, water erupting from the floor and flooding the room. And Dream felt the apartment rock with the weight of it before his eyes were searching through the mist, trying to get a pin on Blade. Fortunately, Techno had seen them coming through the glass, and although he should have been expecting a fight, since it seemed that was just how his year seemed to be going so far, he'd still wanted to avoid one. He was tired, practically dead on his feet, and his adrenaline was waning severely. He needed some rest, or maybe more food, or just something to get him through this. But instead, as he pulled himself through the now shattered glass of the well, he realized the only thing he had left to rely on was his training. Luckily, he had a good teacher. Ah, Emerald Duo! Emerald Duo! The men standing out just outside had been knocked backwards by the explosion, thrown across the room and now incapacitated, and before the other men could regain their footing, Techno was running toward them, taking the first one out with a quick punch to the face before pulling the now unconscious shoulders don't fight for our country, soldiers do. I'm doing a thing. I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for asking. Skeppy was knitting. Skeppy was knitting. He was knitting on the couch and Dream shot him. That's so mean. That's so mean. To be fair, Skeppy put Techno in a well floor trap thing. Anywho. The now unconscious soldier, sorry, I had to think about how to say it, machine gun into his chest and firing up the stairs. The bullets found their target and the soldier went down just as Techno dropped the gun from his hands and stepping over both bodies. Then the blade of his scissors was catching up with the third mercenary, jabbing the man in the neck and the steel digging into his flesh, before he saw a fourth one coming up ahead of him, gun raised. The man began to fire, trying to avoid hitting his already dead comrade, and Techno managed to duck the shots before reaching him, shoving his aim up into the ceiling before burying the scissors into his chest. Why was Skeppy knitting? Oh, well, I'll tell you why. It was in the movie. It was in the movie. We're just copying the movie, but adding and twisting it to our own advantage. Because that's what Danny and I do as authors. He. My boy just needed a cat. My man just needed a check. I just want to knit and get money and be happy. Obviously, that was not Skeppy's case. Man is slaying for... Dude, he's slaying for real. He'd reached the top landing now. He could see two more men coming after him, but he managed to get a hold on the gun of the first, before showering the next one with bullets. The man fell unceremoniously to the ground before Techno turned back around to face the first and let his scissors run over the man's face. He stumbled backward at the sharp jabs, But before Techno could deliver the final blow, he felt a fist bury itself into the side of his face, knocking him into the nearest wall before hands grabbed onto his jacket and slammed him back against some stone. He opened his eyes, barely managing to get a glimpse of his attacker before there was a hissing sound, and a spray of mace hit him square in the face, causing him to flinch backwards and close his eyes to the ground. Oh, come on, man. He couldn't help but grumble, his eyes now stinging with pepper spray, and his cheek beginning to bruise over. He could also feel the edge of a silencer underneath his chin, a rough hand pinning him against the wall. "What's shaking, Bacon?" came the cheery voice that Techno so distinctly remembered from over the phone. Same asshole tone, same smug lilt. "You must be Dream," he said in mock surprise, unable to keep the disdain from his voice. "What gave it away?" the man asked, and although Techno couldn't see him, he could hear him smiling. "The white pants, the neon jacket, it just..." He let out a little sigh. Sorry. He let out a little sigh, eyes still burning. "It leans Dream." He heard Dream let out a little chuckle, but when he spoke again, his voice was suddenly cold and serious. "Where's the drive?" he demanded. Techno was running out of options, for sure, but there was no way in hell that he was going to give this guy what he wanted. This man had kidnapped Tommy and stripped Phil of his freedom, and if he told Dream where he'd sent the drive, he'd be putting the last person he cared about in danger. He couldn't risk that. The only life left that he was willing to risk was his own. So carefully, he reached into his pocket with a sigh and murmured, "I've got it here somewhere, it's just hard to see," before pulling out the pin of the hand grenade and offering it up to Dream. "Is that it?" he asked. The grenade itself hadn't been hard to palm off of one of the soldiers as he made his way up the stairs, but it still managed to strike a chord of surprise in his opponent as he let it fall from his hand and onto the floor in between him and the mercenary. Dream taking in a sharp breath as he watched it clatter to the floor by his shoes before looking back up at Techno with a smirk. "Ballsy," he admitted softly. And then, just like that, he was letting go of Techno and sprinting for the doorway. Techno had already planned his route, covering his face as he dove through the glass of the nearest window, the grenade exploding just behind him. He landed hard on the stone patio outside, letting out a groan of pain as he lay there for a moment, his ribcage burning, eyes still stinging. It felt like every muscle in his body was trying to crush him, and he tried to get himself to relax. Then slowly, as the dust began to settle, he dragged himself to his feet, letting out a tiny sigh as he started down the stairs of the patio, still without his shoe. However, just as he was about to hit the road, he heard a spray of gunshots bury themselves at his heels, and he halted in his tracks, letting out a defeated sigh as he turned around to face Dream, standing at the top of the stairs, his handgun raised toward Techno's chest. "Nice try, pork chop," Dream said smugly, his expression full of victory. Techno tilted his head, glancing at him up and down carefully, before saying, "What size shoe are you?" Dream lifted an eyebrow, beginning to make his way down the stairs before asking, "Why? You want my foot up your..." But just then, a whizzing sound came from the... I'm sorry, this part just makes me laugh so much. But just then, a whizzing sound came from the air behind him, and Techno heard him cry, "Ah, shit!" before he reached behind him, pulling a tranquilizer out of his posterior. Techno almost wanted to laugh as he watched Dream sway on the steps, only managing to mutter, "Mother," before falling flat on his face. Then, Techno stared down at his limp body, studying the soles of his shoes before saying, "Looks like an 11. Just as he heard footsteps come from above him and glanced up to see who it was. Oh, I get the yeah, because it's Technoblade. He's our little Minecraft pig mascot. Dude, everything that Lloyd calls 6 in the movie, we just changed it for Dream to call Techno some form of pork, like, pig name. Like, we got pork chop, we got bacon. I don't know. We got the pig. Like, you know. This is what happens when you give silly people guns. So true. Looks like an 11. Just as he heard footsteps come from above him and glanced up to see who it was. Agent Soot, stood at the top of the steps, trank gun in hand. And if Techno didn't know any better, he'd say the agent looked pissed, beyond angry, as he made his way down the stairs to grab Dream's handgun. Then he straightened, glaring up at Techno as he gestured toward Dream's ragdoll form and asked, "Who's this lunatic?" Oh wait, that's Wilbur, sorry. "Who's this lunatic?" "I don't know. Dream, I can't talk! Help!" Then he straightened, glaring up at Techno as he gestured toward Dream's ragdoll form and asked, "Who's this lunatic?" "I don't know." Techno sighed wearily, throwing his hands up in the air before glancing back at his ex-partner, Dream. The British are here! That is the greatest line. That is the greatest line I've ever heard in response to Wilbur showing up. Well done. If the name rang any bells for the agent, he didn't show it. Instead, he ignored the name, nodding toward the street and saying, "Let's go." Bad idea, Techno thought. The whole reason he left Soot behind in Bangkok was so that he wouldn't get involved in this mess. Yet, here he stood, saving Techno's life for the second time in 2 days, somehow tracking him halfway across the planet and putting his entire career on the line. But for what? For Blade? He didn't even know Techno. He didn't even know his name. It had to be something else. The money, maybe, or the fame. "I'm good," Techno replied finally, not wanting to get either of them into an even bigger mess than they were already in. Soot's already angry expression sharpened into a dagger-like glare, and he raised Dream's handgun toward Techno with a practiced precision before snapping, "Let's go." Techno let out a huff, raising his hands in surrender. "It sounded like a question," he said hotly, before nodding toward Dream. "Can I at least grab his shoes first?" Soot raised his eyebrow before glancing down at Techno's feet. "What happened to yours?" "It's been a long day," Techno gritted out. Sorry, I was fixing my posture. Posture check. Soot shook his head softly, tawny curls bouncing gently, but ultimately sighed. "Fine. But then you have to let me put these on you." Techno watched as he held up a couple of heavy-duty zip ties and let out a long, heavy sigh. "You're kidding." "Do I look like I'm kidding?" Soot returned dryly. Why not just kill Dream right now? It would fix so many problems. You're asking the wrong lady. I didn't write this movie. It's for, plot. Yeah! Danny and I literally said plot at the exact same time. No freaking way. Bro. Jinx moment. W. Wilbur impression? Oh, thank you. My name's Wilbur. Wilbur Soot. I'm Lovejoy, you know. Oh my gosh. Do I look like I'm kidding? Soot returned dryly. He didn't. He looked like he was just about ready to shoot Techno in the face, so Techno figured it'd be better to comply. Besides, he was tired, and although he knew he could probably take the kid head on if he wanted to, the last thing he wanted to do was fight someone who just saved his life. So, carefully, he bent down and took Dream's boots before holding his hands out in front of him. Soot stepped forward cautiously, wrapping and tightening the zip ties carefully around his wrists. He seemed on edge, his eyes dancing uncertainly, and Techno tried to make himself appear as relaxed and calm as possible to dissuade his anxiety. The last thing he wanted to do was scare the kid into a fight unnecessarily. "Calls that way," Wilbur said after he was done, flicking his wrist toward the road. And as Techno led the way, he couldn't help but feel slightly uneasy. This had not been part of his plan. Hell, he didn't even know where the agent was planning on taking him. "How did you find me?" Techno asked, just as Soot's silver Audi came into view. "You make a lot of noise," he deadpanned. Techno rolled his eyes, starting toward the passenger seat, but before he could reach for the door handle, the agent called after him. "Hey." He turned back to look at Soot, watching as he gestured toward the trunk. "Open it," he ordered. Techno stared at him blankly for a moment, waiting at the passenger's side door for him to change his mind. But when Wilbur didn't say anything, he reluctantly followed the instructions, walking toward the car's trunk and popping open the back hatch. As it slowly lifted, Techno shook his head in protest. "Not the trunk," he grumbled. "Get in." Soot replied impatiently. Techno glanced back at him, his body aching in protest. I could really use a comfortable chair right now. But before he could finish, Soot had lifted the trank gun and clamped down on the trigger, a dart puncturing itself into the meat of Techno's thigh. He let out a grunt of pain before immediately feeling his leg go numb, causing him to fall forward and barely catch himself on the edge of the trunk. Still, he managed to gain enough footing to pull himself upright and into the back of the car, practically growling as he sat down to face the kid, his vision beginning to swim. He hoped his expression was as bitter and angry as he felt, but he could already feel his brain clogging up with cotton, the pull of unconsciousness invading his mind, and he watched groggily as Soot took a small step toward him and gently pushed the barrel of his gun into his shoulder, supposedly so he wouldn't fall forward. And as his back hit the bottom of the trunk, he could feel himself already drifting off to sleep. Haha. Techno gets a nap. Good for him. And Audie bro is British and rich. Hell yeah. Or he stole it. Anyway. Alright. Next section. We are halfway through the page. More than halfway through the page. Check out the bar. Slay. Alright. I'm excited for these next parts. I think Tommy's coming soon. I can't remember. Or maybe I'm just remembering right, because I'm smart. It took a while, but eventually Dream made it back to his base of operations. Although with a numb ass and a sore temple, when he'd gotten sunk with the tranquilizer, he'd landed flat on his face, and when he woke up again, he was packed in his chair on the plane, a smug Philza Watson smirking back at him. Dream had half a mind to kick him in the face again, but he felt like the agent would take that more of a satisfaction than a punishment. So he just sat back in his chair and waited to land. One touchdown and a helicopter flight later, they had reached Zabraka Castle. I'm just going to say that I said that right. And as soon as they were in the door, he watched his soldiers. Watson? Yeah. He's Phil Watson. That's his real name, bro. What? I'm not going to call him Minecraft. We're not going to call him Minecraft. This is a serious action Minecraft AU. See, it's funny because serious action Minecraft AU is hilarious to say. Anywho. He watched his soldiers escort Philza up the stairs, the old man glancing back at Dream one last time to give him a cold, death-filled glare. Dream just smiled back at him, hoping that by the end of all this, he would be the one to put a bullet between the man's eyes. And then he turned toward the operations area, laid out in one of the castle's large ballrooms, before a voice intercepted from his left. Is that Philza Watson? Dream looked up, his eyes landing on his old partner. He let out a frown, flashed briefly across his face before ignoring him, continuing his awkward walk, his butt cheeks still numb. This didn't seem to deter him. However, because the next thing George was saying was, "What the hell are you doing?" "George, long time," Dream drawled, letting the man trail behind him. As they entered the operations room, large screens hung up on the walls and a row of monitors sitting along a long wooden table. Wires ran throughout the room, and Dream drifted toward the refreshment table in the corner as he continued. "If I'm honest, I liked your old haircut, where you didn't look like a bitch." George ignored him, the words running over him like water as he snapped, "We did not give you permission to kidnap former CIA personnel and their family members. You've been hired by the agency to do your job because you couldn't," Dream interrupted, stopping in front of the coffee maker before grabbing a paper cup from the stack and calling over his shoulder, "Could someone get me a Vicodin, please?" "So where is Blade?" George asked, folding his arms over his chest in that annoying, condescending manner that Dream remembered. "Where I want him," he returned coolly. "In the wind?" George chided. "On the run. Oh, wait. Dream is not British. Damn it. "On the run, scared shitless," Dream exclaimed, his voice raising in volume. George slammed his hand down on the table beside him, a frustrated look playing over his features. This is 10 years of my work on the line here, Dream. Dream took his hand and swept the table clear, his anger getting the better of him as he let plates and utensils and bowls of food clatter onto the floor at their feet. George took a surprised step back, but he looked far from scared, no doubt familiar with all of his ex-partner's antics. I am your only prayer of getting that drive back, Dream snapped at him, because I can do everything the agency can't. You know all those rules you guys are always trying to work your way around? They don't mean dick to me. So unless you want our names to be spilled across every news alert on every phone and every pocket on earth, shut up and go sit in the corner. George didn't say anything, just stared at him calmly, and Dream swore he could see a hint of his old self there, laughter behind his ex-partner's mismatched eyes. But as soon as it was there, it was gone again, and George was looking away from him with a roll of his eyes. Dream let out a sigh before glancing back down at the table, now askew from his outburst. But there among the wreckage, he spotted the bottle of painkillers and murmured, "Oh, how about that?" He picked it up, rattling it a little before calling out, "Forget about the Vicodin," and beginning to make his way out of the room. Behind him, George asked, "Why are you walking like that?" And without looking back, Dream shouted back, "Because I got shot in the ass, George!" And although he didn't turn back around, he could still feel the weight of George's smile. Oh man. DNF / neg, but also they're funny in this because we like to make fun of them. My favorite line, yeah! Let's go. Yo! Ginger! Thank you so much for the wrist scribble for 4 months. What the muffin, bro? How you doing, man? I started watching The Witcher, and then I stopped because I need to watch it on a TV. I need the experience, bro. But thank you so much for this resubscribe. I hope you have a great rest of your time here on the stream. We're gonna keep reading, though, because we're getting there. We're already an hour and 22 minutes into the stream. I want to be done before 2 hours. Tommy barely registered the sound of the helicopter landing outside, but it didn't matter to him anyways. He had resigned himself to the fact that no one was coming for him. He imagined Phil was still at the funeral, probably texting him and figuring that Tommy's phone had run out of battery, or that he was resting, or watching a movie. He imagined his house with Sam still lying on the floor, a blood stain on the carpet that would never go away, and a Christmas tree still decorating the living room. He imagined his parents, their warm smiles and endless laughter, and he imagined it wouldn't be long now until he saw them again. He didn't know what these people wanted, but he didn't care. He just wanted to go home again. He just wanted his parents. He just wanted Phil. And just rewatched the episode, and I'm like, I have something I need to do, so stop to say, "Aw, thank you so much, Ginger. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Good luck with what you need to do." You talk like a DSMP fan, LOL. Is that a good thing? I mean, I'm not super into the DSMP anymore. I'm only here for fan and SBI at this point. I mean, I used to be a DSMP fan. I'm not afraid to admit that. Slay. Oh, Tommy's making me cry. Dude, literally, Tommy is like sad. So we're gonna get into it. Yes, good thing? Okay, slay. You didn't see it, but I just did a whip. I just did a whip on my side of the thing. Alright. He just wanted his parents. He just wanted Phil. And then, as if the universe had heard him, he listened as the doors behind him opened with a clatter and a familiar voice said, "Hey, mate." Tommy whipped his head toward the sound, his eyes widening as they touched his uncle's. That familiar blue reflected back at him, and before the man could even take another step, Tommy was shooting up from his spot on the bed and running toward him, the tears already coming as Phil opened his arms for a hug. He tossed himself into them, warm and comforting and familiar, and couldn't help the sobs that suddenly racked his body. He could feel himself shaking, unsteady on his own 2 feet, but Phil took it upon himself to take most of Tommy's weight, gathering him in his arms as his nephew buried his face into his black trench coat. I'm so sorry, he heard his uncle say in a broken whisper. I know, Tom. I'm sorry. Tommy pulled his head away then, glancing up to look at Phil. He seemed fine enough, other than a bruise crossing the bridge of his nose. But before he could get out the question, Philza was already running a hand over his cheek and beating him to it. Are you hurt? He asked softly, searching Tommy's gaze with increasing concern. Tommy only choked back another sob, trying to get his voice under control before saying, I'm fine, but Sam... His voice broke before he could stop it, and suddenly he could feel himself swaying on his feet, everything spinning back to him again. But Phil was right there to catch him, and the next thing Tommy knew, he was sitting on the edge of the bed and Philza was kneeling in front of him. Deep breaths, Tommy. Just like that, okay? He was saying, pressing one of Tommy's hands against his chest, letting him feel how slow and steady they came. Deep breaths. Tommy tried his best. It was practically impossible between the tears and his shaking, but he still managed to take a few choked breaths before blurting out, Sam, I watched them. Phil's jaw flexed slightly, and Tommy saw a flash of anger cross his gaze, something he'd never seen before, so out of place for the man who always had warm smiles and a sunny disposition, before it softened again. He took Tommy's hands in his own and murmured, I know, kiddo, before reaching up and pushing some of Tommy's golden curls back from his face. But nothing's gonna happen to you, alright? I'm not gonna let anything else happen to you. And for a split second, Tommy believed him. But Phil hadn't understood what Tommy meant. Sure, he was scared and didn't know if they were ever going to getting out of here, but the guilt he felt weighed far heavier than any death sentence, and more words were tumbling from his lips before he could stop them. I'm so sorry, Phil, he started, his voice breaking in several places. I'm so sorry. I never should have asked to go to the funeral with you, and I should have been more responsible. Tommy, Phil interrupted, his reassuring expression crumbling, but the boy didn't let him finish. I should have fought harder, or ran faster, or maybe I shouldn't have ever existed. Oh, Tommy. And then Sam would be alive, and you wouldn't be here, and... Tommy, listen to me, Phil snapped suddenly, his voice warm but firm as he tugged Tommy's hands closer to him, and Tommy could see the beginning of tears glistening in his eyes, his voice shaking over the next few sentences as he said, This is not your fault. Don't you ever think that. Tommy felt his bottom lip begin to quiver again, an unexplainable weight crushing his lungs. I want to go home, he whispered. Phil quickly ducked his head, bringing a hand up to wipe at his face, and Tommy knew that he didn't want him to notice that he was crying, but it's impossible not to. Still, when he looked up again, his eyes were a bit clearer, and he slowly stood up before planting a kiss on top of Tommy's curls. I know, kiddo, he said again. We'll be home soon, I'll promise. Tommy looked up at him, blinking the tears from his eyes. How? He whispered. It felt like an impossibility, like they'd never get out of here. There are so many guards, armed, surrounding every exit, every open space, every path. If Tommy couldn't even escape his own house, how on earth were they supposed to escape this island? Phil only smiled at him ruefully, finally coming to sit on the bed beside him and whispering, Well, we've still got an ace up our sleeves. Tommy's eyes widened slightly, quickly registering what Philza meant before whispering, Blade? He knows, Phil said in a low voice with a nod. We spoke. Does he have something to do with all this? Tommy asked softly. Phil's jaw clenched tightly. They'd never talked about stuff like this before, and Tommy could tell that his uncle was fighting with himself over how much to reveal to him. But finally, he said tightly, seriously, he's in a bit of a tight spot, and I lended him a hand, so to speak. Tommy stared at him, thoughts running over each other in his head. They want to know where he is, he concluded. Phil nodded minutely, a pained grimace crossing his face. Is he in trouble? Tommy prodded, his heart tripping anxiously over itself. What happened? Philza opened his mouth to say something, but quickly snapped it closed and turned his head away from Tommy with a sigh. The less you know, the better. But Phil, this is how I can keep you safe, Phil said firmly, pressing a gentle finger into Tommy's chest. All right? Tommy stared at him, wanting to know more, wanting to know everything. But then his mind flashed back to that first night Blade watched over him, when he saw the agent beat a man unconscious with nothing but a flashlight. But he never considered that to be his Blade. His Blade was the one who'd watched movies with him, and ate ice cream with him, and made sarcastic comments, and gently picked him up when he was sleeping to carry him to his room. His Blade liked Spider-Man and Kristen and his record collection and Smarties. His Blade had lied just to protect him and had spent every night for a whole week guarding him and had taken care of him when no one else had. And Tommy still didn't even know his name. "It's Blade," he'd said in the hospital, his gaze warm and reassuring. It had been a lie, because of course it had, but it was all to keep Tommy safe, to keep him out of situations like this one. "I understand," Tommy whispered finally. "What the muffin?" Hold the phone. Chat. Pause. We have a raid? Whoops, beloved, thank you so much for the raid. Oh my gosh, welcome to the stream. How are y'all? What were you doing? What was you doing on your stream? I hope it was lovely. Dude, yeah, we're doing, shout out to you. We're doing so many freaking Bedrock Bros stuff. But raiders, welcome. My name is Juliberry. I stream Minecraft and other games, and I read fan fiction. I hope y'all are having a lovely night. Grab a pillow, get some water, get a snack, get comfy, and we're gonna freaking read the rest of this chapter. We're reading chapter 4 of The Pink Man, which is a fanfic that Danny Art Online and I have written. It's very good. We were doing some parkour for it. Dude, that's great. I love parkour. Parkour is like one of my favorite things to do on Hypixel. But oh my gosh. Voops, thank you so much for sending your community over here. I really appreciate it. If you need to go and get a snack and do anything after your stream to take care of yourself, please do. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of the stream. Thank you so much. Alright, I understand. Oh yeah, okay. To keep him out of situations like this one. "I understand," Tommy whispered finally, turning to glance down at his hands, still shaking in his lap. He clenched them tightly before he felt a gentle hand lay on top of them, and he turned to look up at Phil, who was staring at him, concern written all over his features. "Are you really all right?" he asked. "They didn't hurt you at all?" Tommy winced, remembering the way the goons had grabbed him and dragged him out of his house. They'd been a bit rough with him, sure, but it was nothing permanent, so he just shook his head. "I'm all right, Phil. Honest," he said softly. "And how are you feeling?" Phil asked, and Tommy could tell by his tone that he was talking about his physical condition. "Tired," he admitted, before offering up a tiny shrug when he saw Phil's worried eyes. "Can't sleep." It was true. He was really fucking tired. It had been almost a day and a half since he'd last slept, way past any kind of normal schedule he'd previously had, but his nerves felt completely frazzled and fried, and every time he closed his eyes all he could see was Sam, and as the thought of him crossed Tommy's mind again, his vision suddenly went blurry, a second round of tears springing into his eyes. Philza immediately saw this and was quick to pull Tommy closer, murmuring soft words of reassurance as he tucked the blonde into his chest and began rubbing familiar circles into his back. Tommy could feel the steady beat of his uncle's heart through his ribcage, savoring the sound of it as he curled further into his side. He never thought he'd have this again, the warmth of Phil's embrace, or the honey-sweet sound of his voice, and he suddenly felt himself closing his eyes to soak it in, wondering if his uncle's arms would be the very last place he'd ever feel truly at home. Ow. Oh. My heart. I'm lying on the floor. Oh my gosh. Danny, you're so cool. You're so cool, Danny. Oh my gosh. Hearts in chat. Hearts in chat. Techno woke up in an extremely uncomfortable position in Wilbur's trunk. The agent had all but tossed him in the back, his body scrunched up like a crumbled piece of paper within the tiny space. He hissed with pain as he tried to readjust himself, but his frame was too large for this tiny hatchback. And before he could think about it twice, he started kicking at foldable chairs in the back seat. After a few attempts, he finally managed to get it to fold down, letting out a groan as he stretched out his leg, every joint in his body aching with protest. My heart feels weak, just like bro. Where's my... Hold on. I gotta... Wait, where's my emote? Did I not put it... Dang it. I thought I had my gun emote here. Oh, I do. Take that back. Okay. Every joint in his body aching with protest. You look like shit. He heard Soot snap from the front, voice still angry, and Techno wondered how much longer the agent was going to stay mad at him. He blinked slowly, still trying to get the fuzz of the trank out of his mind, before offering up an explanation. That's the most sleep I've had in 36 hours. They pulled me from field duty. Soot interrupted coldly, his tone turning into something harsh and commanding, something Techno hadn't really thought the agent could pull off. They think I'm into whatever you're into. You're gonna tell them I'm not. Techno finally raised his eyes upward to meet Soot's sharp gaze in the rearview mirror. What gives you the impression they care what I think? He asked dryly. Clearly they wanted him dead, and Techno found himself still trying to wrap his head around the $50 million bounty they'd put on his head. This is my career, you understand? Soot snapped suddenly, glaring back at Techno in the rearview again. You're just an asset, but it's my career, my reputation. PM Wilbur's favorite Taylor Swift album is Reputation. Confirmed! He's a Swiftie! Guys, I am a Swiftie. I'm not afraid to admit it. Techno couldn't help the distasteful frown that crossed his lips at the word asset, and he quickly glanced away and... Oh my gosh, that's right, because Getaway... Bro, I'm like thinking of this whole thing in my mind now. I'm gonna make a meme later. Don't worry about it. Techno couldn't help the distasteful frown that crossed his lips at the word asset, and he quickly glanced away, familiar words floating back to him. Your syndicate. You'll be disposable. For some reason, he'd gotten the impression that Soot saw him in a different light, but he shouldn't have been surprised. Phil was the only one in the agency who'd ever really treated him like a human being. Well, and one other person. What did you steal? Soot demanded. Techno raised an eyebrow, taking a deep breath. Technically, I didn't steal anything. He corrected lazily. Puns gave it to me. Soot frowned, tilting his head to the side. Speak now. Speak now! I was literally crying to it the other day. No way, you're thinking in your... Shut up, Pepper! Shut up! You're so... Oh my gosh. Is this bullying? Bro. I'm just gonna point more Julie gun emotes at you. yeah, you're making me laugh tonight. Thanks, guys. I needed that. Puns gave it to me. Soot frowned, tilting his head to the side. Then why didn't you give it to HQ? He asked sharply. Well, he gave it to me, Techno retorted briskly. There was a pause. There was a pause. A slight hesitation where Techno saw doubt slip into Soot's gaze, his eyebrows creasing together in confusion. He wasn't a bad kid. He just worked for the wrong people. But by now, he was already in over his head. He knew about the asset, and he knew Techno had it, which meant he had gotten himself involved, which is exactly what Techno had wanted to avoid. He had really just been a bystander in all of this, a loyal agent teamed up with the wrong partner, for the wrong op, with the wrong target. It was clear that the center chief had gotten to him, maybe even tipped him off to Techno's location, so it was only a matter of time before the CIA came running after them, and it was probably all downhill for the agent after that. Who knew? Maybe after Dream killed Techno, he'd be shooting for Soot next. What did he give you? His accent was still stupid, though. Techno stifled a sigh, but since he'd already reached the point of no return, there was no use in hiding anything from him now. An encrypted drive, he replied. Soot blinked, the frown on his face only growing. What's on it? He questioned. It's encrypted, Techno repeated dryly. I want to see it, Soot challenged, his gaze boring to Techno's in the rear view. And Techno had half a mind to tell him to keep his eyes on the goddamn road. But for the sake of avoiding yet another murderous glare from the agent, he held his tongue. Instead, he let out another tiny sigh. I don't have it, he admitted. Where is it? Soot demanded. Techno stared at him in the rear view as they made a turn, his heart thudding uncomfortably loud in his chest. He still didn't know what Soot's plan was. Was he going to try and bring Techno in to clear his own name? Or was he going to help expose the information on the drive? Techno really wouldn't blame him for turning him in, since that would probably be the easier thing to do. A lot less risky. A lot more likely he'd make it out of this alive, and he couldn't help the doubt that stirred inside his gut. How do I know I can trust you? He asked. Soot's gaze whipped back toward him, and he snapped impatiently, Because I just saved your life. Techno raised his eyebrows with a nod, conceding. That's a fair point. He had just risked everything to come save him. And if the agent wanted him dead, Techno was sure he would have killed him already. Neither of them knew what was on the drive. Hell, they hadn't even known there was a drive to retrieve. But Soot had still come all this way just to figure out the truth. Techno was used to holding everything close to his chest, but now Philza and Tommy already in the Emily's clutches. What was there left to lose? Techno waited patiently for him in the front seat. And finally, Techno let out a long sigh and murmured, somewhat begrudgingly, I sent it to Kara Puffy, the UK agency chief, okay? She retired and lives in Prague. Soot stared at him for a moment before pulling his eyes back to the road and stewing the information. Techno studied his face, his eyebrows still creased in concentration. And as the silence dragged on, he couldn't help but ask, What are you thinking? I'm thinking about what to do with you, Soot replied stiffly. Techno frowned. Maybe think about it this way, he said firmly, propping himself onto his elbow. They already had me kill an agent. Now it's my turn. How do you know you're not next? The car suddenly rolled to a halt as they hit a red light, and Soot's eyes met Techno's in the rearview mirror again. He stared at him, banged up and bloody, bound in the trunk of the car, and Techno could see the waver in his gaze, the uncertainty as his hands dug tighter around the wheel. You can trust me, kid, Techno thought desperately. Just trust me. Then the light turned green, and Soot stared back at the road before muttering, Get comfortable. Techno let his body slump back onto the floor of the trunk, keeping his head up so he could still meet Soot's gaze if he had to. Then he blinked, the words washing over him, and he asked, Get comfortable like we're going to Prague, or like jail comfortable? But instead of answering, Soot just jerked the wheel around and stared it heading in the opposite direction. And Techno couldn't help but feel the tiniest bit of relief. Prague it is, he thought. And as he closed his eyes to rest, he couldn't help but hope that Puffy had already managed to crack the drive wide open. Czechoslovakia? Love her. Yes, we're going to Czech. Ugh. I've never been there. I've never been to Europe. I would like to go one day, though. With friends, preferably. Alright, I think this might be our last section of the night, so everyone... Pog right now. Pog in chat right now. If you can't reach your keyboard, just say Pog out loud. Let the people look at you weird. Like, why this person just say Pog out loud? That's so odd. But you know what? Props to them for having the confidence to do it. Anyways, she ate. Dream let out a sigh. Did a country project onto... I don't know, man. Dream let out a sigh as he pulled out a chair in the operations room, taking a seat in the middle of the floor next to a fancy tray of fruit. George stood a couple feet away, arms folded over his chest and eyes scanning the screens. But Dream tried his best to ignore the agent's presence. If there was one thing he could count on, it was George getting in his way. Something that was somewhat of a recurring pattern ever since their days at the academy. Where are we? What do we got? He asked, just as he reached over to pluck a grape from its vine and popped it into his mouth. Wet team's en route, one of the tech operators replied, typing away at their monitor. Everybody be advised, he has help, Dream announced to the room, leaning back in his chair and settling into the fabric comfortably. George tossed him a look then, eyebrow raised. We sure? He asked skeptically. Dream cast a glare back at him. Well, I didn't trink myself in the ass, so yes, he snarked. George just smirked at him and turned back around, causing Dream to roll his eyes. Got something, one of the techs suddenly announced, picking up his laptop and heading over to where Dream was sitting. CCTV in Bangkok. Night of the op. Dream felt George sidle up beside him to look over his shoulder, but he resisted the urge to turn around and cast a glance back at him, gluing his eyes heavily to the text screen. The footage was somewhat grainy, and the street it showed was heavily crowded, but that didn't stop Blade from being seen, his pink hair giving him away as he dumped a yellow package into a mailbox outside a post office. He ditched the asset, George stated, his voice almost impressed, and Dream felt a brief flare of jealousy spring up inside him. Where's that package now? He demanded. Well, it's already in the system, the text said, gesturing to the monitor before tapping out a few buttons to zoom into the footage. Resolution's too shitty to read the address. Clerk said it was to a P.O. box in Prague, but he doesn't keep any records, so that's the best we've got. Dream grinned. That'll do, kitten. That'll do, he said dismissively, and the tech nodded shortly before turning away. I forgot we changed that, because in the movie he says that'll do, pig, but I'm like, that's for tech. Pig's reserved for techno. So Discord kitten is canon in in this story. So do with that information with what you will. George glanced down at him, raising another eyebrow. You know who's in Prague? He asked Dream with a frown. Dream looked up at him. Oh, shit. Wait. Oh, this is happening in this chapter. Oh my gosh, I'm excited now. Dream looked up at him, smug grin still plastered across his face. No, he admitted, his smile widening menacingly. But I know who does. Kitten, don't think too hard about it. That makes me clench uncomfy, bro. Don't worry. Bro, it's okay. I'm holding y'all's hand. I'm holding your hand. Anywho, Philza could barely pull his eyes away from Tommy from the moment he'd walked into the room. He'd been so unexplainably worried about him, every fiber of his being longing to see him, that when he'd held him in his arms again, he didn't realize how hard it would be to let go. Over the past few years, Tommy had Tommy had become unequivocally, irrevocably his. Every piece of his soul belonging to the 14-year-old, and he didn't think he'd realize how much his nephew had truly meant to him until that very moment. Being away from him, knowing that his life could be in danger, it felt like the world was crumbling around him. Even worse, Tommy blamed himself for all of this, when really this was Philza's fault. He should have been there for him. He should have never left him at home by himself. He should have taken the boy with him to the funeral like he'd asked. Or maybe he should have been more careful with Blade. Their relationship had been no secret. They'd had close bonds ever since Tel Aviv, yes. And he'd practically raised the kid, training him to be the effective agent he was today. But that wasn't an excuse. He should have known correspondence with any syndicate member after retirement would be risky, and he should have followed protocol and cut off contact completely. But he couldn't just bring himself to give Techno up. He was too important to Philza, too much like a son, and Philza was tired of losing the people he loved. Now he was staring at Tommy, who was sitting on an expensive couch that was pressed up against the wall, and couldn't help but notice how far away his stare was, how distant he seemed. There was no humor behind his eyes, none of the familiar laughter that Philza loved so deeply, and he felt the chasm of guilt in his chest widen. Then, as if feeling his stare, Tommy turned to look at him and shot him a small smile. It took everything in Philza not to just break right then and there, to run over and bury the kid in his arms and tell him how sorry he really was, that he should have listened to him, that he should have stayed. Then the door was bursting open, and Philza's head was whipping toward Dream and several goons that followed him. He immediately felt his heart drop and began to step forward, trying to get in between Tommy and their captor. But before he could reach him, Dream was already sliding up to the boy and saying, "Goldilocks, would you be a lamb and excuse us?" "Go to hell!" Tommy snapped up at him, to which Dream reached out and grabbed the collar of his blue cardigan, yanking him up out of the seat and shoving him toward the exit. This caused Tommy to let out a yelp as he stumbled backwards, falling helplessly into the arms of one of the mercenaries, and Philza felt an icy hot jolt of anger through his chest. He lunged toward Dream, ready to slam his fist into his face, but before he could, he felt hands on him, pulling him backward. "He's a pacemaker, jackass!" he growled, just as Dream swung his cold, calculating gaze toward him, a sick smile on his face. "Get off me!" Tommy snapped as two of the soldiers began to pull him toward the exit, half dragging, half carrying him. "Fucking get off me! Let me go!" "Well, then he definitely shouldn't stick around for this next part," Dream replied smoothly, walking over to the door and shutting it behind them. Philza could still hear Tommy's protest from down the hall, his voice peaking, as he tried his best to pull loose from the iron grip the mercenary had on his arms. But it was hopeless. Anger surged within him, an uncontrollable raging fire, and he quickly lowered his deadly gaze on Dream, his words lashing out like a hot whip. "If you hurt him, I will fucking kill you," he sneezed. "You hear me, you bastard? I will fucking end you." Dream made a series of shushing sounds, unfazed by Philza's threats, as he walked over to a nearby chair and picked it up before placing it firmly in front of the older man. Then he gestured to the chair opposite him and said, "Please." The rough hands of the mercenaries shoved Philza down into the seat before taking out a large band of leather and tying it firmly around his torso, pinning him to the back of the chair. But Philza wasn't really all that focused on them. Instead, he was trying his best to burn Dream alive with his gaze, imagining how satisfying it would be to rip his heart from his chest, if he had one. And Dream stared back at him with a smug smile, delight dancing in his brilliant green irises as he stood above him. Then, once they were done tying Philza down, he watched the man dramatically pull a pair of pliers from his pocket and setting it down on the table closest to them. Philza stared at the tool. It certainly wouldn't be the first time he'd experienced torture, although he had to admit he thought the last time he had would be the last time, when the CIA had offered him retirement. This isn't exactly what he pictured. Then Dream slowly began stripping off his green coat, tossing it over the back of his chair before asking, "Who's in Prague?" "Fuck. There's 3 million people in Prague," he sighed. "I don't know all their names." "Right," Dream replied with a nod, rounding his chair before walking past Philza, exiting his field of vision as he continued. "Well, you see, your boy mailed a package, which means with countless contacts at his disposal, and this being a particularly challenging situation, there's someone in Prague who he trusts the most. More than you, even." Philza knew that Dream was just toying with him, but that last sentence didn't fail to strike a nerve. As he felt the man lean into the back of his chair, he couldn't help but clench his fists in anger. He was going to kill this man. He was going to kill him if it was the last thing he ever did. "Who is it?" Dream asked in a low voice. "It's your mother," Philza snapped back coldly. "Boring," Dream sighed, and before Philza could even think of another witty retort, he felt the man's hands clamp down on his ears and twist, painfully, and he bit down his jaw, gritting his teeth together tightly to keep from making any noises, refusing to give him the satisfaction. Then after a few more moments, Dream let go, the pain slowly ebbing as he walked back into Philza's line of sight and fell gracefully into the chair across from him. "Happy?" Phil asked with a huff. Dream ignored him completely, instead kicking one leg over the other and saying, "Now, whatever I just did to your ears, it's not even torture. I just made it up on the spot. It just came to me." "You don't say," Philza cut in dryly. "And that's how this is gonna go." Oh wait, Dream's American. "And that's how this is going to go," Dream finished with a smirk, reaching to his right and picking up the pliers. Then he looked toward Philza and clicked them menacingly, smiling as both of his men stepped forward and grabbed Philza's wrist. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and say trigger warning for, brief mentioning of torture, nails, pulling. I'm sure you could figure out the rest. I just want to put that out there in case anyone needed to step away. I love y'all, and I want to make sure y'all are okay. "Hey, what the hell are you?" Philza snapped, but he stopped mid-question as Dream's chair scraped across the floor, watching as the man slowly scooted closer to him, before reaching out and grabbing his left hand. Philza stared down at his fingers as Dream carefully leveled the pliers at one of his nails and clamped the metal around the edge of it. Fuck, this is going to hurt. Who's in Prague? Dream asked again, his tone a bit more excited this time, his eyes dancing with an incessant smile. Nobody, Filzer growled. Boring, Filzer repeated. Dream repeated. Shit, sorry. Dream repeated, and then he began to pull. Filzer's nerves pinged with pain, jolts of electricity shooting up and down his arms as Dream yanked at his fingernail, and he gritted his teeth again, letting out a hiss of pain when the nail finally came free. His whole hand was already feeling bruised, his index sore and bleeding, but he still managed to let out a huff of laughter. This was nothing compared to the burns on his feet or the scars on his collarbone. This was just a lunatic trying to squeeze in a little fun while he could. And by the looks of it, he was having a marvelous time. Should we try again? Dream stated, his smile winding sickeningly across his face. Sure, why not? Filza chided, returning the grin. He could play this game all day. Dream moved on to his next finger, lowering the clamp of the pliers before glancing up again and asking, Who's in Prague? I already told you, I don't know. Boring, Dream drawled, before he yanked his hand back, ripping out fingers. Filz's nail hard. Phil yet let out a tiny yelp of pain, cringing slightly, before watching Dream's gaze shift back toward him, a menacing glint in his eyes. He tilted his head to the side curiously, glancing Filza up and down before leaning back in his chair with a smirk. Maybe we should bring the kid back in here. When they grabbed Tommy and shoved him back into the room, the first thing his eyes landed on was Phil's bloodied hand, before tracing his eyes back up to his face. He was looking at Tommy desperately, like he wanted to say something, his eyebrows knit with panic, but whatever it was, he didn't get a chance to say, because the man sitting across from Phil suddenly stood up and turned toward Tommy, a dark smile on his lips. It's okay, sunshine, the man said, beckoning Tommy closer. I just need you to step over here for me. Tommy stared at him for a second, noticing the unsettling jaundice of his eyes, pretentiousness practically seeping from his posture. Phil had mentioned him briefly as the person trying to hunt Blade down, the person who'd taken them hostage. Dream. Tommy's eyes flickered back to Phil briefly, wondering what he should do. But Phil only looked back at him apologetically. This wasn't up to him. None of this was. So he took a cautious step forward, which caused Dream to nod and wave his hand through the air again, saying, That's it. Come on, little birdie, he said with a sweet lilt of his voice, or to his voice, as if he were talking to a 4-year-old and not a... blah, 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 blah. As if he were talking to a 4-year-old and not a 14-year-old. And once Tommy was within arm's reach, he reached out to grab the collar of the boy's cardigan, hauling him forward to stand beside him. Now, Dream said, turning back toward Phil with a sick smile. Who's in Prague, Watson? Tommy's head whipped toward Dream, eyes widening slightly with realization, before locking eyes with his uncle. Phil looked completely defeated, although his glare toward Dream remained bitter. And then it hit him all at once. Of course. That was why they'd brought him here. He was Dream's leverage. He was Phil's weakness. Wait. He was Dream's leverage. He was Phil's weakness. Bruh. And before he could think about it twice, he was blurting out, Phil, don't tell him shit! Suddenly something struck him across the face, knocking him sideways, and Tommy felt his temple hit the hardwood floor. Immediately, his hand went to the side of his face where his cheek was burning with the force of the strike, and distantly he heard someone shouting his name. No, the music's not happy, it's depressing. We're listening to sad music. This is sad music. I don't know, man. It's just lore. It's just supposed to be background noise. Suddenly something struck him across the face, knocking him sideways, and Tommy felt his temple hit the hardwood floor. Immediately, his hand went to the side of his face, where his cheek was burning with the force of the strike. And distantly, he heard someone shouting his name, but his whole head was ringing with the force of the impact. He let out a gasp of pain, slowly pushing himself upright before pulling his hand away from the face to inspect it. There was no blood, and that's when Tommy realized that he'd been slapped. Finally raising his head up to look at his attacker, glaring at the blonde bitch with all the hatred he could muster. But Dream just stared back at him, a smile playing across his features. Oh, don't look at me like that, he said playfully. You're making me want to hit you again. Then he turned back toward Phil, his tone growing darker. Now, there's a lot more where that came from, so let's try this one last time. He reached down and grabbed the collar of Tommy's shirt, dragging him up on his knees. Tommy grabbed at his wrists, but it was no use. The man's grip was like iron. Who's in Prague? Tommy's eyes darted toward his uncle, his gaze pleading not to give Blade away, but when Phil looked back at him, he saw something he didn't think his uncle even had in him. Fear. Then Phil's gaze was pulling away from his face and looking back up at Dream. Defeat written all over his features. Puffy, he said at last, his voice broken and hollow. Kara Puffy, retired agency chief. Tommy's heart faltered in his chest, the name hitting him so hard that if he weren't already on his knees, he'd definitely be falling to them. First Blade, and now Puffy? When would it end? He thought about all the friendly video calls and happy birthday messages he had received from Aunt Puffy over the years. The warm hugs when she would visit during the summers, her light laugh as she sipped wine in their living room, her fond smile as she watched Tommy doodle in his notebooks. She was like family to him, to both of them. Would all of that just fade away now? Would he ever even see her again? See, that wasn't so hard now, was it? Dream remarked, tossing Tommy back onto the floor, and he landed on the hardwood in a heap, his whole body shaking. He felt tears spring to his eyes. Everyone he'd ever loved was about to die, and it'd be all his fault. All because he'd lived. He didn't move, but he heard Dream order his men out of the room, one of them releasing Phil from his bindings, and he immediately fell to the floor beside Tommy, pulling him into his arms and asking if he was all right. But Tommy just closed his eyes tightly, wanting this nightmare to end, wanting to wake up at home again. Then the sound of the door lock echoed from the other end of the room, and they were alone again. Toms, let me see, he could hear Phil saying, his voice full of panic as he ran a gentle finger over Tommy's still stinging cheek. Are you all right? Tommy slowly opened his eyes, wanting to argue that he was fine, but his voice wouldn't come. All he could do was stare up at Phil, his already broken heart slowly starting to fracture as he searched his uncle's gaze. Why? He finally managed, his voice straining underneath all the emotion he felt, the betrayal stinging like a hot knife. Why did you do that, Phil? Why would you give them away? Phil shook his head slowly, eyes glistening with unshed tears, before finally saying, Because I can't lose you. But Puffy, Tommy argued, pulling Phil's hand away from his face angrily. Blade would do the same, Phil finished firmly. They'd give me up in a second if it meant saving you. Tommy flinched, the idea too unbearable to even think of. But why? He finally asked, his voice breaking. Oh, Tommy, Phil whispered, his expression softening as he reached out a hand and brushed back a few stray strands of blonde hair from Tommy's face. Because you're the only family they've got. And that's the end of chapter 4! Oh my gosh! Guys, we went a little bit past 2 hours, but we got it. We did it. It's over. Who frickin' Ray? We did it. We finished the chapter. I am so happy right now. I feel relieved. I feel a sense of freedom. This is so nice. I hope y'all enjoyed that. Don't forget to leave kudos. Leave a comment. Here's the chapter link. Take my money. Oh my gosh. I'm sobbing. Bro. Oh my gosh. That was fun. That was fun. I forgot how fun that was. Oh. I will say, SBI Sunday forces me to drink a lot of water. So you know what? Shout out to that. Slurp, slurp, slurp. It is very... Oh, don't be sad, guys. Techno and Wilbur are on their way to go save the day. It's gonna be fine. Still morning. Phil's finger... Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yes, can we get an 07 in the chat for Phil's fingernails? This has been a tremendous loss for the nail art community. Yes. Oh my gosh, guys, that was great. Did y'all enjoy that? Besides the angst, but like, I miss SBI Sunday. Holy moly. That was great. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy I got to do that. Low key, I'm gonna hit up Kit. Wait, Kit's live, bro. Y'all, let's go raid Kit, and then we're gonna talk about Tommy Tuesday, because holy cow, I gotta get back on that. We read 19 and 20, but I don't think we finished. We didn't finish. We gotta still catch up, don't we? We gotta catch up, don't we? All right, chapter 5. Don't say it's fine. Did you read chapter 6, Christy May? Because that's out now. Yeah, we read 20 and 21. So we're going to be reading 22 and 23 on Tuesday. That will be so fun. Guys, oh my gosh. All right, where's my music? I want to listen to my streaming music again. Boom, bam, ba-dam, bam, bing, bong. Shazam. Oh my gosh. We're going to listen to happy music after reading super angsty stuff. Why am I still getting ads? Ugh, this is so rude. I just want to watch Kitsage and raid her. So, gonna go and say people with our lovely little raid command. Copy that. And then, oh my gosh, I forgot I had little emote things. No, it's on my list to read right now. Yippee! This is poggers news to me. Oh my gosh. Phoenix. Yes, Golden Phoenix. Oh my goodness. We will read it. We will read it. It will happen. It will happen. But guys, okay, the raid is going. Okay. We're gonna raid Kitsage. Guys, oh my gosh. I love y'all too. Guys, this has been so fun. Okay. Guys, Kit is streaming Minecraft right now. They are currently streaming on the Javi Core hardcore world, but join the raid. We're gonna send y'all over to my bestie, and thank you all so much for hanging out with me tonight. This was super fun. I hope you all enjoyed. Shout out to Danny, my one true. And without further ado, chat, stream tomorrow. I will be streaming Minecraft because I want to play Minecraft. Minecraft is fun to me. And so, without further ado, remember, chat, you are loved, you are worthy, you are valued, you are beautiful, and I love you all very, very, very much. And I will see you all in the next stream. Bye!